Welcome to the AmericanaMusic.com podcast with your host, Sarah Popejoy.
Today we are interviewing Americana artist Jonathan Rundman from Minneapolis, Minnesota. He's been touring and recording for the last decade with the Silos. This year he releases his album Waves on the 11th of April. It's a rocking, fun-moving album with solid songwriting. We're excited to have him on our show. Welcome, Jonathan.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about where you're from and how your journey of music and songwriting started?
Yes, I am originally from Michigan's Upper Peninsula, which is really far north on the shores of Lake Superior, across the water from Canada. And it's a rural place in the woods with no cities and no freeways, lots of trees and snow and rocks. That's my birthplace and place that I lived until I graduated from high school. That was a very formative place. After that, I immediately became a musician and started touring. Lived on the road for 30 years full-time after that. I lived in Eugene, Oregon in the early 90s, right at the beginning of the grunge period. Exciting time to live there.
Yeah.
And all of the music coming out of the Northwest at that time. And then after that, I lived in Chicago in the late 90s, which was fantastic. And lately I found that Chicago almost feels a little bit like my musical hometown, because there's something about when you're in your mid-20s and you're going to shows every single night. And then 20 years ago, I moved here to Minneapolis, and I've been here ever since.
Lake Superior, it's had a huge influence on this album, I would say.
That's right. I was wondering if you would notice that. This is the first interview I've done about the records. I've got other interviews scheduled and podcast appearances, but this is the first one because the album is, it isn't out yet. It's brand new. And so I'm wondering, will people recognize the importance of Lake Superior on this album? And that is exactly the focal image for the whole record. Obviously, the album's name is Waves. All the pictures in the record are of Lake Superior. And then I felt like the primary song that centers the album is called Living on the Lakeside, a song that I wrote about the importance of the Great Lakes in my life. And of course, it's based on the fact that I was born in a town called Hancock, Michigan, which is on the shores of Lake Superior. And my wife grew up in Escanaba, Michigan, on the shores of Lake Michigan. And so the Great Lakes has been hugely informative for me. Of course, now I live in Minnesota, and we also have Lake Superior in our state. And I noticed that there are a lot of songs in music history about New York City. There are a lot of songs in music history about people who love Los Angeles and California, the Beach Boys. And there's a million songs about Texas, everyone who loves being from Texas.
Oh, God. I'm an Okie, so I got to throw that in. I got to give them a hard time. It's part of my, heritage.
But I noticed there's no songs about the Great Lakes and about how wonderful the Great Lakes are and how awesome it is to be from the Great Lakes. That was my motivation for writing that particular song, Living on the Lakeside. And then I just felt like at this stage of my life, I wanted to call attention to the Great Lakes.
I think that's really cool when artists do that. I'm a big Lucinda Williams fan.
Oh, me too.
And one of the things I've always loved about her writing was how she would center a lot of her songs about the places she was, like Charles and Greenville, a ton of songs about Louisiana.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool. I know DeFranco in her stuff, she has, especially like in her earlier stuff, has a lot of references to Buffalo and the scenery around Buffalo. I don't know. I just think it adds another level because it's places, people have never gone. And so and it also makes it more yours. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. This is reminding me of, like, even if you listen to old time music or folk music or bluegrass music, so much of that stuff is rooted in singing about, Kentucky or Tennessee or Virginia, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
One of my favorite Chuck Berry songs is called Promised Land. It's a travel song where he starts, I think, in South Carolina on a bus, and then he rides the bus down to Atlanta and then to Birmingham and then to Houston. Then he gets on a plane and flies to LA. And the whole song is talking about all the cities where he's traveling. So yeah, you're right. And of course, Lucinda is a perfect example of songs that do that.
Yeah, for sure. Who were some of your early musical influences?
Well, when I was a little kid, I was really shaped by 70s rock radio. So I loved Paul Simon, Simon and Garfunkel. My family had Simon and Garfunkel 8-track tapes in the car. I knew every note of those records. I got into the arena rock of the 70s. So I really loved bands like Kansas, Styx, Boston. I loved music that had prominent keyboards.
Right.
I was a little kid taking piano lessons. So I love to hear those songs by Kansas and Styx and stuff have such wonderful piano and organ parts and synthesizer parts. Arena rock with keyboards was a big thing as I got to be in 5th grade. Then when the 80s came around, I was really captured by what we now call Americana music. But back then they called it roots rock.
Right, right.
It's when rock bands started to be influenced by country music and using country music instruments.
Yeah, or Southern rock.
Yeah, there's Southern rock, and there was things happening in LA with bands like Lone Justice and Peter Case and stuff like that. And then there were things happening in Nashville with like Jason and the Scorchers and Southern stuff like the Georgia Satellites. And then, of course, some of my favorite bands ever were the Silos and the Rainmakers, which were, the Silos from New York, the Rainmakers from the Midwest. They were rock bands and playing kind of loud, aggressive rock, but they were using acoustic instruments and they were informed by country music and folk music.
Yeah, very, very cool. I think that's always what I've gravitated to. On the album, you played organ, accordion, harmonica, mandolin, and mandola. Okay, you're going to have to explain the mandola because I'm not super familiar with that instrument.
Yes, I can tell you what it is. So you know how in the string instrument family in an orchestra, you have a violin, and then the big brother is like the viola, and then the big brother from that is the cello.
Okay.
And that is the upright bass.
Right.
4 instruments of the strings family. Well, in the mandolin world, they have the same.
Ah.
The mandolin is equal to the violin, and then the big brother to the mandolin is a mandola.
Okay.
A larger instrument with the strings of a viola that plays a lower series of notes. And then if you go up from that, this is a really rare instrument. You get a mandocello, which does exist, but not many people play them. There's a mandolin instrument that corresponds to all the stringed instruments like a violin and a viola and a cello.
Oh, that's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, and so I'm a mandolin player, and that's one of the things I love about Americana music is that particular instrument. And I've always just been really drawn to the mandolin. And even in rock music, there's always been mandolins that appear in rock history. If you remember, like Maggie May by Rod Stewart had a mandolin solo.
Yeah.
And then in the 80s, the Hooters played a mandolin, and Bruce Springsteen had mandolins on Glory Days.
Sonny Came Home.
And Sonny, yeah, right, Sean Colvin, right? And,
yeah.
Bruce Hornsby in the Range had Mandolin Rain, so the mandolins are always kind of sneaking into rock and pop music, but I just love that instrument. So I've been playing mandolin since high school. And then about 10 years ago, I got a mandola, which has been really fun because that just allows different voicings. Oh, who's famous for playing mandola a lot is Steve Earle.
Oh, okay. Cool. Very cool. I did not know that. In your album Waves, your initial song on the album is Overture. I would say if you close your eyes, you feel as though you're rocking gently on the waves. Can you talk a little bit about your idea for that?
Yeah. Last year, I went to Nashville to record the album. It's always been a dream of mine to travel to Nashville and make a record on analog tape the way that classic albums were made. And of course, the pilgrimage to Nashville is such an important story in music history. And so it was a thrill to do that. And my producer's name is Ron Gomez. Ron and I, when we were getting ready to make the record, we thought, okay, we're going to do a regular 10-song album so it could be on vinyl. 5 songs on one side, 5 songs on the other side. And so we went and we tracked the album in Nashville. And after the basic tracks were done, Ron said, have you thought about writing smaller instrumental pieces that we could string between the songs, like Abbey Road by the Beatles, a little more interstitial songs between the music. And I thought, wow, that's a pretty interesting idea. And I had never done that before on a record. So I started composing tiny little musical compositions to fit between. And then Ron said, have you thought about a string quartet? I said, why don't you take the music from an existing song and do a string quartet arrangement? There's a song on the album called Let's Put On an Opera. I took the melody from that song.
Oh, okay.
And I arranged it for string quartet. My children are violinists in orchestras. And so my daughter played the violin parts, and my friend Joanna played the cello, and then Ron, my producer, played upright bass. I notated the notes in a music score program, so the sheet music, they tracked it as an actual string quartet. And so the album starts with the overture. And we use the word overture because it's sort of a joke about the term opera. The song is called Let's Put On an Opera. And if you go to the opera, the first thing you hear is the overture, which is a musical selection that gives a preview of some of the songs you'll hear later in the opera. The reason these little songs appear throughout the whole record, it's all a reference to the way an opera is structured.
Really? Really? That's cool. I did not catch on to that. That's really cool.
And you'll notice there's a song on side B called Lakeside Leitmotif. And that is the same idea. It's the song song Living on the Lakeside, arranged for Finnish and Mexican folk instruments. It's the melody from the chorus of Living on the Lakeside, but it appears later in the record because that's another thing in an opera. There's a musical form called a leitmotif, which is a recurring melodic phrase that recurs throughout the opera. That's all the inside baseball of what's happening on this record.
That's really, really cool. I love that. I love that concept. How was the journey to the bomb shelter and getting to record in Nashville and on analog?
It was so exciting. I had never done anything like that before. Ron, my producer, lives in Nashville. He's a session musician. He's working in studios in Nashville all the time, playing bass on various records. I know Ron because we're both in the touring ensemble for the Silos. So we know each other from being on the road together. It was about a year and a half ago. He said, "Hey, what are you going to do with all these new songs?" And I said, "Well, I suppose I should make a record, but I don't know how or when or what it would be like." And he said, "Well, why don't you come to Nashville and we'll reserve a studio and we'll lock it out for 3 days, bring the Silos touring band, stay at my house." He said, "I'll cook all the meals and we'll go to the studio every day from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and we'll knock out the whole record in 3 days and we'll record to analog tape." And I thought, I've never done anything like that in my career. I've made many, many records, but never like that. And of course, in recent years, I've been in the Pro Tools world, where you're recording to a computer and then everybody's tracking independently from one another at different, a once in a lifetime chance to get these musicians all in the same room, just like the way they made records like the Rolling Stones albums or something, with 4 people in a room and they start up the tape machine and you go. And we didn't even use a click track. I mean, we just played live in the room with no reference in our headphones or anything. It was so exciting. I never ever thought I would have a chance to make an album like that.
It probably just felt so real and natural as a musician.
You're a little bit nervous because the pressure's on, but it's not scary like in a bad way. The stakes are high.
Right.
You're there in the studio. You've only got 3 days. You got to track the whole record. You got to do 3 or 4 songs a day, and you just got to go for it. But, Ron was a great producer. He's done this before. He knows how to make it happen. The band we had was so fantastic that you can just trust the skills of the players because they were just so talented.
And you've been playing with them too.
Yeah, and that's the thing where Ron said, we got to get this band because we all know each other from touring with the Silo. We know how to play together, and we enjoy each other's company. And so it's the perfect lineup.
Wow. 3 days. That's fast too.
Yeah, it was amazing. As someone who's never worked that way, I think it's quite common in Nashville.
Well,
so professional. The clock is ticking all the time. And so they just get the best players in town and they just get in there and they nail it and then they go home.
So I've recorded in Nashville quite a bit and 3 days is really fast.
With everybody in the same room and they just go for it?
We didn't record analog or anything.
Okay.
Basically just would get the rhythm section together and they would all play together and then bring in other instruments. But 5 days was the fastest I've ever recorded a whole album. That's 3 days is like fast.
It's fast. It was new for me. And so I was just trusting Ron. I was like, you tell me what to do and we'll do it.
But you also had a band that knows each other inside out. I'm sure that's a little different too. Even though as good as those guys are, they don't always, they're still kind of learning you.
And I think for a lot of artists, if you're a singer-songwriter like me and you go to Nashville, I would assume a lot of what happens is you show up and your producer, but they call in the drummer, they call in the bass player. You don't even know those people. And they show up, then you play without even, knowing each other personally. It's a different way to do it.
Yeah, but they're really amazing, though. They pick up fast.
Every music city has its own way of recording. So imagine if you made a record in New York with the New York people, it might be different. If you went to LA, it might be different there. And then there's, of course, in music history, sometimes each town had their own house bands. Back in the day, you would go to Memphis and play with, that band that's at that one studio there. And then the Wrecking Crew is in LA, and maybe Austin is a different way.
Yeah, even Muscle Shoals had its own.
Yeah, that's Muscle Shoals have got the Swampers, as the song goes.
It's funny that you say that because Tulsa just redid Leon Russell's old studio. I did record something here. It was so funny because I'm used to Nashville. I like the time thing. You stop, you just pile them up. You know what I mean? You got everybody timed, you got everything ready, and you go. They were like, how are you getting this many people to record? That moment, though, I realized that, every town's different in how they do things. And I was just going by the old Nashville standard of get them in, get them going, get them out.
Isn't Tulsa one of the places in the early days of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers?
Yes.
And it was the Leon Russell studio, right?
Yeah, it was Leon Russell's studio. He also, I don't know if Bob Dylan recorded there or not. I know he's been there, but I know like Leon Russell's first album was with two of the Beatles.
Wow.
George Harrison and Ringo Starr. I know they came to the studio a lot.
And don't you have the Bob Dylan Museum now?
Yeah, it's actually right next to the Woody Guthrie Museum, which is cool. So back to your album. Oh, I wanted to talk about State Line Fireworks Outlet.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to have to say that I love that song. It's so well written. It's grooving. It's my favorite song on the album, personally.
Wow, that's awesome.
How did this song evolve? Can you talk about writing this song?
Yes, absolutely. This was the most difficult song to write on the record. Most of the songs on the album are within the last couple of years, and I wrote them quite quickly, and they're very, very contemporary in terms of in my life and in my ideas. But State Line Fireworks Outlet, I started writing probably 15 years ago. And I had the concept and I had the chorus and I had a lot of the lyrics. I tried a bunch of ways to sort of play it and sing it, but I just could not figure out what the music was going to be. Like the composition of the melody and the chords, I just could not figure it out. The last solo album I made was 10 years ago. And I made a demo of it for that record, but it just did not feel right. It didn't make the cut. So I didn't record it 10 years ago. And it was in the back of my mind for another decade because I knew this is a really good idea for a lyric and a really cool concept for a song. And so I just didn't give up on it. I talked to Ron and we realized, I'm going to go to Nashville to make a record. I thought, I'm going to see if I can actually finish the State Line Fireworks Outlet song. And so I just decided I'm going to really pound it until it's done. And then when I figured out that I could play that opening riff, with the bending string at the end and, the primary riff of the song, once I figured that out, then the entire thing came together finally. And I've never, ever spent 15 years on one song before. That is really unusual.
Yeah.
But I waited and waited and worked, and it finally came together. So I had played it on my guitar and sung it, playing it like a Stone song or something. It was kind of like nasty and mid-tempo. And when we got to the studio, we got in the room to track it, and Ron said, we're going to play it a lot faster.
Yeah.
Do you think we should play it like, and I strummed a little bit, and he's like, no, even faster than that. And I was like, what? You can't play it faster than that? And he's like, trust me, we're going to play it really fast. And then we did it, and it was so much faster than I ever dreamed. But I think, of course, Ron's instinct was correct because it really rocks out,
Well, yeah, I think the lyrics call for it too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm so glad. I mean, this is why I think an artist should have a producer. It's so helpful to have a voice of reason from outside your own brain to help you think of things you never would have thought of on your own. So we ended up playing it really, really fast. And then the thing about the lyrics is this, like I mentioned, a lot of this album is centered in the Great Lakes and the Great Lakes states. And the states and the Great Lakes have different fireworks laws. So for example, Minnesota and Michigan and Illinois have really strict fireworks laws. So you can only buy sparklers or something, right? But Wisconsin has really loose fireworks laws where you could buy dynamite and huge things that are really dangerous that'll blow off your fingers. So what Wisconsin will do is they'll have fireworks outlet stores that they'll put on the state line of the freeway right on the border of Wisconsin. And then everybody from Michigan and Minnesota and Illinois will drive to Wisconsin. They'll cross the state line and go and buy their fireworks in Wisconsin and then take the dangerous fireworks back to the states that have the strict laws. So when you live here and you travel between the states, you can see when you cross the state line, when you enter Wisconsin, there's all these fireworks outlets. And so that's what the song is about.
It's great. It's great.
Have you ever been to the Great Lakes states?
I haven't.
Time to come to Minneapolis and Chicago and Madison.
Oh, yeah. I've wanted to go to both. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, then you can buy your fireworks in Wisconsin.
They got some pretty crazy ones here, too, in Oklahoma.
That's true. I bet down south you can buy some serious explosives.
They're like, we'll just sell anything.
Yep. And then, I think with the lyrics too, that song was kind of like almost like a songwriting exercise where I tried to challenge myself to see how much economy I could have in the lyrics, where the lyrics could be incredibly dense and that there's no wasted words. Every single word or almost every single concept in the whole song is about fireworks. And so I tried to make it like with the mechanics of a clock, where there's no wasted syllables and every single title thing is a reference to fireworks.
Well, it was a great song. And yeah, I love how you did that. That was really cool. Can you talk about the first two singles of your album? Elizabeth, Don't Waste Your Breath, and Let's Put on an Opera.
Yeah. So Elizabeth, Don't Waste Your Breath. I wrote it, I guess, about a few months before going in the studio. What I love about that song, of course, is that it's a co-write with Walter Salas-Humara, who is the lead singer and band leader for the Silos, and one of my favorite songwriters. For the last 10 years or so, I've been able to tour with Walter around the country playing Silos shows. And so we got to play at South by Southwest and Hardly Strictly Bluegrass and the Old Town School of Folk Music, and, just had some amazing experiences with Walter. And he's a fantastic writer. A year ago or so, he sent me an MP3 in my email, and he said, hey, here's some music I wrote. Can you make a song out of this? So the MP3 I got was drums and guitar, and that's it. And so I had it in my email sitting there and thinking, like, one of these days I should see if I could finish the song Walter sent me. And then when I talked to Ron and we realized, oh my gosh, I'm going to go to Nashville and make a record, and I want to have some new songs. I checked my email, I downloaded that MP3, and I thought, I wonder if I can make a song out of this. My challenge as a writer, and this is one of the things I love about co-writing songs, sometimes you get the music and then you have to add the melody and the lyrics, or sometimes it's reverse. Sometimes you write the lyrics, you give the lyrics to somebody else and they write the music.
Yeah.
I think the thing with that particular song was, Walter wrote all these amazing guitar riffs where there's a descending chord pattern and there's all sorts of like cool guitar parts throughout the song. I didn't want to sing over the top of the riffs because the riffs are so good. And so the challenge was to write the lyrics in all the in-between places where the riffs aren't happening so that they're not fighting with one another. I knew the melody for the chorus had to be a 4-note melody because the guitar goes dum, dum, da, 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 dot, 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 dot. So those 1, 2, 3, 4, that's the only place for words. And then the guitar happens again, and then there's another dot, 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 dot. And so I thought, okay, I need words that fit into that structure. That's why the song is Elizabeth. And then you wait a couple bars, and then you say, don't waste your breath, So I had 4 eighth notes to work with. So I had to think about how to do that. And the lyrics came about, the line that came to me was, I saw you crying on the subway. That was just unprompted. It was just the muse. I had no reference point for it. It was just what came into my mind. I saw you crying on the subway. And I thought, okay, that's the first line. What on earth is this song about? And that line gave me the whole song because I thought, okay, first of all, it's a song about the city. It's about an urban environment, so it could be New York City or Chicago or a big enough city to have subway trains. So it's an urban song, and then it's about someone crying on the subways. Why would you see someone on the subway crying? And then I was thinking, well, you're on the subway when you're going to work. It's people commuting to the office. And so obviously someone is having trouble at work if they're crying on the subway, or they're dreading their job or something. And so that one line that just kind of fell out of the sky and hit me on the head prompted the whole story of the song, which is, it's a song about have you ever known someone who hates their job and they're miserable and you wish they would quit. That's the story of the song.
Cool. It's really cool. It's fun how as a songwriter you can go backwards into creating a story.
Yeah. And what's really different about this album too, that's very different from every other record I've ever made, is this album has a lot of narrative songwriting, storytelling, where there's a plot line with characters and the characters have names. For the first 30 years of my career, I never wrote songs where it's almost like a movie or there's a dramatic arc. But this album is filled with songs, people with names who are in a narrative drama. That's been a really cool evolution for my writing. And I think, of course, that came from touring with the Silos, because so much of the Silos songs are narratives with people's names in the song. So I think it was really inspired by, that's another way to write songs. And I had never explored that before. We were talking before about Lucinda Williams. Like, she's a perfect example of somebody who writes narrative songs where the song is like a movie and it tells a story about, this happened and then that happened, and you get to know the character in the song.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Amy Mann's real good at that, too.
Oh, yeah. I love Amy Mann. She's one of my all-time heroes, and that's, perfect example. Last week, I was just listening to her album called Whatever, her first solo record, and it has the song called Mr. Harris about an old man who lives next door, and she falls in love with him, and it's like a movie. It's like a movie. minutes. It's just amazing.
I'm going to have to go listen to that one. When I was reading your bio, it said that you had a Master of Divinity.
Yes.
And you went to 4 years of graduate at Luther Seminary. Can you talk about how that background has impacted maybe not only your songwriting, but your lens through which you songwrite? I know it was a big influence on your song Hospital.
When I was young, I never went to college. So I graduated from high school and just became a musician and hit the road. And then I toured for 30 years. So I never went to undergrad. I never had the experience of having a professor or writing a research paper or being in class. I just missed the college experience completely. So then throughout my life as a musician, I got interested in church music and liturgical music, that kind of stuff in my 40s, and started to write music that's in the almost more like classical music or, choral music for church choirs and things like this. Then someone told me that I should go to seminary and get a Master's of Divinity and consider being a pastor in a church.
Wow.
I thought, wow, that's totally a completely different career. And also I thought it's never going to happen because I didn't go to undergrad. If you go to seminary, you have to have an undergrad degree. Seminary is you get a master's degree.
Oh, okay.
And I never went to college. So I thought there's no way I'm going to go to college for 4 years just so I could go to seminary. But then I actually got booked to play music at a seminary. And one of the professors told me, there are alternative pathways for non-traditional students once you're in your middle age, just because of life experience. Do some research and see if maybe you could go to seminary without an undergraduate degree. I came back here to Minneapolis and I did some research and I found out that yes, seminaries have alternative academic pathways for non-traditional students like me. And so I applied and I got a full tuition scholarship.
Wow.
So when I was 48 years old, I went to seminary for 4 years and I retired from touring because I'd been on the road for 30 years and I just completely stopped touring and I became a full-time student, and I had never written a paper. I'd never been to class. I'd never used footnotes or a bibliography. I had to learn how to do all the things you learn in college. One of the things that happen when you go to seminary in many traditions is that you have to do a chaplaincy class or a chaplaincy experience. And that means you get assigned to work at a hospital or a prison, something like that, where you visit patients and help people who are in a crisis.
Right.
I spent the summer of 2019 as a hospital chaplain. So for 3 months, I worked at a hospital and I visited patients who needed help or they wanted someone to pray with them or with people as they're dying, and this kind of stuff. And so that's what I spent my summer of 19 doing. And while you're being a chaplain, you also have class. So then you have a professor and you're studying what it means to be a chaplain and you're going to, writing papers and doing the academic work. And so at the end of my chaplaincy assignment, I had to do a final project. And my professor said, okay, you can write like a 15-page research paper, or you could make art and write an artistic statement. I'm going to choose the art option. And so I wrote that song Hospital about what it was like to be a hospital chaplain. And then I wrote an artistic statement describing each verse and each lyric of the song, because the song, every lyric is a true story of what I encountered in that summer that I was working at the hospital.
Wow.
So I turned in the song, and then the professor said, I'd like you to play this song for the class. So then, so for all the other chaplain students, I brought my guitar to the hospital and I played the song live in the class. Yeah. So I really love that song because it's so meaningful to me personally, because I remember every lyric. I remember those people and those patients that I was interacting with. My wife, it's her favorite song on the record. The band just killed it. And it's just such an exciting recording, and it's the only song that doesn't have a drum kit. The drummer Gerald is playing a snare drum with brushes, upright bass, and we're standing. It's really like rockabilly, the way like Elvis's band would have been in the 50s. I'm absolutely thrilled with how the recording turned out.
Yeah, the whole album is just very energetic, which is kind of your style of playing anyways. It definitely comes across on that record for sure. I just want to mention you're going to be the opening act for the Silos on their 40th anniversary tour throughout the Midwest.
Yes, it's very exciting because the first date of the tour is in Minneapolis, in my hometown. Do my album release show in my hometown, opening for the Silos, and then when my set is over, then I'll play keyboards in the Silos for their headlining set.
I was wondering.
And then for my set, the Silos rhythm section from the record will back me up. So it'll be like you'll see the same band play 2 different sets for 2 different artists.
Oh, how cool.
It's also fitting that this tour is through the Great Lakes states because of the theme theme of the record. So we're going to play, on the shores of Lake Michigan in Chicago, and, we're going to play through Wisconsin and in Milwaukee, also just a couple blocks from Lake Michigan. So it's going to be a very exciting tour. And then we end in Green Bay, which is also on Lake Michigan. So it's a real Great Lakes concert tour.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Jonathan, I really want to thank you so much for talking with us today. It's been a real pleasure, and everybody's going to really, really love your album. It's coming out on the 11th of April, Waves by Jonathan Rundman. Everybody make sure you check it out and go to your favorite place to listen to music. Save or reserve that album so that you can hear it as soon as it comes out. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. This was really fun. And thanks for being the first journalist to talk to me about the record.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan. Here's a short clip from next week's interview with Tony Camel.
I mean, my early influences were centered around a lot of psychedelic rock like Ozzy Osbourne and Frank Zappa. And I just liked weird stuff. My mom and dad had a collection of records and CDs and stuff over the years. And I got into roots music in high school, late 90s, early 2000s. There was this sort of Texas country thing going on that got me interested in songwriting. And I always tend to work backwards. It was kind of through that I looked to classic forefathers of country music like Willie Nelson. In the late 90s, early 2000s, jam bands were a big thing in my world as well. Bring Cheese Incident, Fish, and then worked backwards to the Grateful Dead. They all teased bluegrass songs and in their music. And so it wasn't until college I started getting interested in listening to that style. It wasn't even until after college that I started getting interested in learning how to do that. That's when I discovered Doc Watson. And it was through the discovery of John Hartford where the songwriting worlds came together, where people like Townes Van Zandt and Willie and those old school sort of Texas songwriters melded in my mind with a guy like John Hartford, who's definitely one of my biggest heroes as far as a performing and songwriting.
Thank you so much for listening to AmericanaMusic.com podcast. Be sure to go to AmericanaMusic.com and find playlists of the Americana artists we've interviewed here. Also, be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast platform.